African Americans are not from Africa. Colored people, black people are not from Africa. We are not the same. We are the indigenous people of these lands, right? When Columbus came here, we were the people that he saw. Copper colored people, twisted up hair, look just like me. But the thing is, a lot of people around the world are very upset of this revelation, which doesn't make sense. Because why do y'all always pick and choose when to be our enemy and when to not be our enemy? When we rapping and singing and dancing and playing basketball and football and baseball and all these other things, y'all love us. Oh my gosh, look at them. They're so great. Look at how they do it. Yeah, look at them dancing. But the moment we start speaking on how to better our people, better our communities, y'all turn against us. Y'all shut down. And that's not okay. Because one thing that I've learned in this life is all skin folk ain't kinfolk. We spend so much time blaming the natives, the Africans, the YT, this. Nah, how about we blame ourselves? Because you see, when I go outside, I'm not looking and ducking and dodging the YTs. I'm not looking and ducking and dodging the natives. I'm not looking and ducking and dodging the Africans. I'm looking and ducking and dodging my own people. So I'm not about to spend all my time arguing with these people on TikTok. Because down to the very fact of the matter, at the end of the day, when Chief Yasa needs something, or Chief Yasin is trying to make improvements, or when Chief Yasin's finally making progress, it's my own people who dookie on me, push me down, spit on me. My own people. So no, I'm not about to sit here and argue with these people. No, I argue with you, kinfolk. Get your stuff together. I'm holding you accountable. You responsible. Not these people. Welcome to that cookout.
Hello guys, welcome once again to the channel. I hope wherever you are, you're having a great time. Now, we have known that Black history is something that has always been manipulated or misrepresented, because there is this question that most African Americans have been asking themselves, that for the Blacks who stay in the United States or who have lived all their lives in the United States, were they all from Africa, or did they ever exist in the United States before slavery began? Because there is this notion that all Blacks who are in the United States are descendants of slaves. So in today's video, we're going to dive into some small history where some creators were talking about the history of Black people in the United States and how this history has been suppressed and misrepresented over the years. I want you to take a listen to some of the critical points they put across about how Blacks have endured a lot of challenges and even erasure of part of their history, but still they conquered through their perseverance and resilience. Let's watch this, then come back and share our thoughts in the end.
Wow, they didn't erase us by accident. They erased us on purpose. Let's talk about the most slept on part of our religious history. Black Catholics in America. Yeah, we been here before slave ships hit the South and before white Protestantism ran the block. Black Catholics were already worshiping in places like Louisiana, Maryland, Florida, Haiti, the Caribbean. We came through the French and Spanish colonies, bringing the cross and the culture. Haiti, a Catholic nation. And guess what? The Haitian Revolution, the only successful slave revolt in the Western Hemisphere, was led by Black Catholics that mixed the gospel with ancestral power. But what happened? White Protestant supremacy took over. They pushed that slave obedience theology. They called our incense, our chants, our saints, witchcraft. They told us to forget the ancestors, forget the drums, forget the fire. In the Catholic Church, they didn't shield us. They segregated us. Told us we could pray, but only in the back. Told us we can serve, but not lead. So we left for Baptist, AME, and Pentecostal churches, where we could breathe again. Meanwhile, Catholicism got whitened. White Jesus, European saints, Irish and Italian gatekeeping, and Black Catholics got buried beneath the surface. But here's the truth. We never left. Over 3 million black Catholics are still here. We're still praising, we're still praying, and we're still preserving. And black Catholic saints like Moses the Black, Josephine Paquita, and Henriette DeLille, yeah, they're rising again. This ain't just about religion. This is about black memory, black spirituality, black survival. They tried to whitewash our saints, y'all. Erase our rituals, make faith a tool of control. But black spirituality doesn't die. It resurrects itself every single generation.
We did not all come from Africa. We all came from melanated people who were Africans, Europeans, Australians, Asians. Science states that at one point there was Pangea, right? And all of the countries that were named by white people and given their titles by white people, but that's another story for a different video, were at one point one landmass, right? That doesn't mean that Africa was the only geographical space. It just means that all of the landmasses were one landmass, but Africa was still there. Europe was still there. North America, South America were still there. Asia was still there. Australia was still there. Antarctica was still there. You see what I'm getting at? These landmasses still existed. Recognize that this may be a hard concept for people to grasp because we have been brainwashed for so long and because our history is not told by the people that look like us, but melanated people were everywhere, on every continent. Meaning it is incorrect to say that everybody descended from Africa. That's not true.
I want you to really hear me when I say this. The Catholic Church wasn't just sitting on the sidelines during the transatlantic slave trade. It was writing the permission slip. When I first started reading these papal bulls, I had to stop. Because they're not vague, they're not coded. They literally told Portugal, go, enslave, conquer. Non-Christians were fair game. That's the church in the 1400s. Greenlighting slavery on an industrial scale. And people want to act like it was just the kings and the merchants who did this. Like the church was reluctantly dragged along. No, the church gave it moral cover. It said God is on your side while you shackle people in your holes and steal them from their homelands. And it wasn't just Europe. I'm talking about Catholic priests writing with conquistadors, crossing oceans to save souls with one hand, while overseeing forced labor with the other. Baptisms at sword point, encomienda systems that worked people to death, but called it civilizing them. Thing is, it was profitable. That's what people forgot. Those massive cathedrals in Latin America, the seminaries and monasteries in Brazil, built on enslaved labor. The church collected tithes from the plantation, blessed the trade routes, and baptized the slave ships. So when I see photos of those grand altars all gold and marble, I think, who paid for this? Like, not with money. With their lives, with their stolen children. Sure, there were priests who spoke out. There were always people in the church who knew that it was evil. But the institution, the Vatican, it didn't abolish anything. It hedged. It compromised. It stayed quiet while millions were taken. Even when abolition movements exploded in the 1800s, the church would issue these careful, qualified condemnations of unjust slavery. Like, what does that even mean? Which part was just? The chains? The auction blocks, the branding iron? Please. And let's talk about reparations. The church still holds lands, art, gold, wealth that was built on bodies. They'll apologize in statements. They'll talk about healing, but have they given any of it back? Opened all the archives? Funded reparations meaningfully? It's not enough to say sorry. It's enough to hold a mass atonement while you sit on stolen riches. Because here's the truth that no one wants to say out loud. The Catholic Church helped build the slave trade, blessed it, justified it, profited from it. You can't talk about faith, morality, salvation without talking about the chains that they helped forge. If you're going to talk about the church's history, you better talk about all of it. The prayers, the whips, the conversions at gunpoint, the gold. That's the real story, and it deserves to be told.
to say that Africans sold their own into slavery, but they never mentioned King Alfonso of Congo, who fought to end it. And they definitely don't talk about the Catholic Church green lighting slavery on an industrial scale. In the 1400s, the Catholic Church issued Papa Bulls, official decrees from the Pope saying it was okay to enslave Africans. One of them, called Dum Diversas, literally gave Portugal the right to invade African lands and put people in perpetual servitude. We're not talking just a few ships. We're talking about a global green light, religious approval for the transatlantic slave trade. Then came King Alfonso of Congo, a Christian king who believed in partnership and peace. Initially, he was friends with the Portuguese. He even converted to Catholicism. The Portuguese helped him out by removing undesirable people from the Congo Empire. But then things got way out of hand when the Portuguese started to abduct people. King Alfonso of Congo wrote letters to Portugal begging them to stop what they were doing. He said, "Merchants are taking even nobles and the sons of our kingdom." But they didn't care. The church stayed silent, the trade grew, and millions of people were lost. This is the history that they never taught us. And Black AF history exposes the truth that they tried to erase. This book is on sale right now, and I'm not sure how long it's going to last because these tend to sell out real fast, so I'm going to drop the orange card down below. We're not letting them rewrite our story again. Grab your copy before it sells out.
Mother Teresa is probably one of the biggest arch enemies, because honestly that woman was evil. Okay, that woman was pure evil. She literally would let poor people suffer in pain, and when she got sick she was sent to the bougiest hospital in New York City or California, one of those two. But y'all, Mother Teresa was not who people portray her as, and honestly I feel like a lot of people need to know the truth about this, because that woman, like I said, diabolical. So yeah, Mother Teresa was born in 1910, and her life was dedicated to doing charity work. She went to India to help the poor, help the poorest of the poor and the sickest of the sick. I recommend everyone get this book, Black AF History. It's a really good resource for homeschool parents or even anyone that just wants to know more about American history. It's really interesting. She truly believed that pain was a blessing, and it was something that people should be grateful for. And if they went through painful situations or poverty or suffering, that her belief was that it was a blessing. So she would show up in hospices. There would be people that would be like literally in pain begging for medicine, and they would have the ability to give the medicine and she would deny it. She literally would watch them and pray and be like, God bless you. The money was not there. Like I said, the money was there to help them, but she didn't use the money to help them. And the creepy thing is, y'all, they would, instead of hiring real medical staff, she would have volunteers of churches, and you know, people come from churches to watch these poor people, take pictures of her sitting next to them and praying for them. And the creepy thing is, she knew what good care looked like. Like I said, when she got sick, her ass went right to the nicest, bougiest hospital she could find. And also, she took money from Charles Keaton, by the way, who stole from working class families. If she was during modern times, y'all, she would be a literal Trump supporter. Literal Trump supporter. I already know it. And then another thing is, she said one of the biggest evils in this whole world was abortion. Not greed from the wealthy, not murder of people in war. She went in front of everybody when she won the Nobel Peace Prize and said the greatest destroyer of peace is abortion, not genocide. Which, by the way, Palestinian genocide has been going on for centuries. She never mentioned that one time. And she, like I said, she won a Nobel Peace Prize. She preached obedience to her, women in the group. She literally, allegedly essayed girls, nuns. Yeah, there's a lot of people who've come out and said that she was essaying them, young girls, 12, 13, 14, allegedly. Mother Teresa was not a saint, and people like to imagine that she was, and all these movies and documentaries portray her as this person who was just a selfless, sweet, nun, but she really was not. She played the part really well, and the world applauded her for that. But honestly, she was not a great person at all, and a lot of people need to know the truth about how she really was as a person instead of the way she appeared to be on media. I recommend everybody get this book. Check it out. It is here on the TikTok shop, orange shopping cart. Make sure you guys like and share for more history content.
Africans came to America way before Christopher Columbus ever did. Way before 1492. Let's break it down. So scientists say that all humans come from Africa, which is true. But what if I told you African explorers sailed the Atlantic way before Columbus did? Look up the Olmec heads. The Olmec heads in Mexico. Tell me those heads do not look African. I mean, I've definitely seen some people that look like that. And that's not a coincidence. Then what about Masa Abakari II, the Mali emperor that sent fleets west in the 1300s? Decades before Christopher Columbus was even born, but they don't want y'all to know that. You do research on that, go down that rabbit hole, it will get harder and harder to find information. Even Columbus himself, if you look up his journals, he wrote from the indigenous people that the black people were here. And he found their common spear-shaped pieces of metal that go on the end of the spear. It's called guanin or guanin. It's only from Africa. And he found that in the Americas. It's like, is history hiding the truth, or are we just missing the certain puzzle pieces to put everything together? Do y'all think Africans came to America before Columbus? Don't forget to follow for more conversations like this and save and repost the video.
We are black Catholics. Just by me saying that triggers people. We are black Catholics. Of course, black evangelicals will think that you are lost and you need to be saved, all because of the fact that you told them that you're a black Catholic or you're Catholic in general. We are black Catholics. Of course, a black pope would be ideal for the Catholic Church. I totally agree with that. We are black Catholics. Of course, people will say that Catholicism is the white man's religion. Little do they know that there have been a handful of black Catholic saints that have been canonized. We're black Catholics. Of course, we're either going to sing gospel songs, Negro spirituals, and maybe some Gregorian chant at Mass. We are black Catholics. Of course, people will say the race of Jesus doesn't matter when you show them a picture of black Jesus. We are black Catholics. Of course, people will get upset when you show them a picture of black Jesus or black Mary on social media platforms, but then they don't have any issue with the other depictions of Jesus and Mary in the other ethnicities. We are black Catholics. Of course, it's okay for people to celebrate the Catholic faith in conjunction with their culture, but it's a problem when we celebrate the Catholic faith with our culture. We are black Catholics. Of course, we make up less than 5% of the Catholic population here in the U.S. We are black Catholics. Of course, there's going to be more Catholics in Africa than there would be here in America.
With the passing of Pope Francis, the Catholic Church faces a critical moment, and increasingly, it's black and global. I'm Uncle Sonari, your econ griot, and I'm here to dispel myths, add context, and spread joy. There are over 200 million black Catholics worldwide, and that number is growing. In the U.S., about 3 million African Americans identify as Roman Catholic, and many of those black folks trace their faith through Louisiana, the Caribbean, or African nations like Nigeria and Congo. Now, in Africa, the church is expanding rapidly. The continent now accounts for more than 20% of the global Catholic population, and projections suggest it could reach 40% by 2050. Now, this growth has led to an increase in African bishops and cardinals, with heightened Vatican interests in countries like Nigeria, Uganda, and the DRC. In the U.S., 1 in 5 newly ordained Catholic priests are African born. Now, that highlights the significant role that the African clergy play in the church's future. Now, as the church enters its new chapter, the future is being shaped by voices from Lagos to New Orleans. Anyway, for more information about the culture and the economy, give your Uncle Sonari a like, follow, and share, and check out my Substack, Vanilla is Black.
Wow, what a great piece of history that we are learning today. If you look at the historical books, you will be able to see that blacks arrived in the Americas before slave trade began. And there is a lot of evidence that supports this, both from archaeological, historical, and anthropological data that shows that blacks arrived in the Americas long before slave trade began. We note that there were empires that were already civilized before, like the Mali Empire, where voyages of traders who were moving from that part of the world to the Americas, and this trade proceeded and went on over and over again. So when slave trade was starting, it already found that some blacks already had moved to the Americas and some even settled in that part of the world. So this history is what has been misrepresented in many ways, or in some instances, not taught out as it should be. There are a lot of things and some contributions that have not been talked about that we realize that black people made in the Americas. And that is what we really need to open up and discuss so that this truth is exposed and everybody knows their place within the global history as it is. The presence of black people in the Americas prior to the transatlantic slave trade is supported by a combination of archaeological, historical, and anthropological evidence pointing to early African exploration and migrations. Some scholars suggest that Africans, particularly from West African civilization, like the Mali Empire, may have crossed the Atlantic as early as the 14th century. For instance, the accounts of Mansa Abubakar, a Malian ruler, indicated he launched expeditions across the Atlantic around 1311, potentially reaching the Americas. These voyages, driven by advanced navigational knowledge and maritime technology, challenged the Eurocentric narrative that Africans were only brought to the Americas as enslaved people. Additionally, skeletal remains such as the Wizard of Oz skull found in Brazil, dated to pre-Columbian times, show African characteristics, suggesting early African presence. Cultural artifacts like the Olmec stone heads in Mesoamerica with distinct African features further supported the possibility of pre-Columbian contact between Africa and indigenous Americans. These early African explorers likely interacted with indigenous populations, exchanging knowledge, goods, and cultural practices. Linguistic and cultural parallels, such as similarities between West African spiritual practices and certain Native American traditions, hint at these exchanges. For example, some researchers point to shared agricultural techniques, like the cultivation of specific crops, as evidence of African influence in pre-Columbian America. However, these interactions were not symmetrically recorded by indigenous societies, which relied on oral traditions, nor were they acknowledged by later European colonizers who prioritized their own narratives. The absence of written records from these early African travelers, combined with the disruption caused by European colonization, contributed to the obscurity of this history. These early contacts were likely limited in scale, but they challenged the notion that African presence in the Americas began solely with slavery. So there are a lot of history that was not recorded because during these times, people, especially Africans and even indigenous Americans, were living and using oral tradition as a means of exchanging information from one point to another. So there were no written records that could show that they arrived in the Americas within this time. But archaeological evidence that we have already show that these people had interacted with the Americas before the Columbian period. So this really shows you that while people claim that blacks arrived in the United States specifically during slavery, that really is not the case. Some of them already were existing in that part of the world and they were having their things going on. Because if you look at some of the artifacts that they had, it really tells you that there is a possibility that these people were undertaking their activities in that part of the world. Specifically also, if you look at the crops that they were planting then. So this is evidence that shows that blacks were in this part of the world even before the time that is largely known during the slavery period. The erasure of this pre-slave trade African history in the Americas is largely as a result of European colonial agendas that sought to control historical narratives. When Europeans arrived, they imposed their own frameworks, dismissing or destroying evidence of non-European contributions to the Americas. The transatlantic slave trade, which forcibly brought millions of Africans to the Americas starting in the 16th century, became the dominant lens through which Africans' presence was viewed. This narrative served to dehumanize Africans, portraying them as commodities rather than as people with prior histories of agency and exploration. Colonial powers, particularly in white American society, prioritized a Eurocentric version of history that glorified European discovery while marginalizing or erasing the contribution of non-European people, including Africans and indigenous groups. This selective storytelling was reinforced through education, legal systems, and cultural institutions that upheld white supremacy. So, this erasure of history is something that is systemic. It didn't happen out of nowhere. There are people who contributed to it. There are people who made it come into existence, because you find that through education systems, what children have been taught in school is to glorify the slave trade by making Africans or blacks in the United States look like they only came to Americas through slave trade. And that is not the case. There are those blacks who already existed in the Americas, and they didn't come there just through slavery. They also worked to ensure that black contributions to the growth of America is suppressed and even deleted forever, because they didn't want any other version of history, but only the Eurocentric version that appreciates and glorifies colonization and slavery as it were. The misrepresentation of black history in white American society also stems from systemic efforts to suppress African cultural identities during and after slavery. Enslaved Africans were stripped of their languages, religion, and histories, with their contributions to the Americas such as agricultural expertise, architectural techniques, and cultural innovations often credited to European settlers. Post-slavery, Jim Crow laws, segregation, and discriminatory educational practices further silenced black voices and excluded African perspectives from mainstream historical narratives. Textbooks and popular media often ignored or distorted evidence of pre-Columbian African present, framing black history as beginning with enslavement. This erasure was not accidental, but a deliberate act to maintain racial hierarchies, as acknowledging a sophisticated African past would undermine the justification of slavery and systemic racism. So they knew that if they acknowledge contributions of Africans or black people in the development and creation of America as it is, then their dominance would be diminished, because they will not have anybody to convince that blacks are weaker or whites are superior to blacks. And that is what really is happening. They have used every form of information dissemination to ensure that they don't have true history depicted to Africans or even blacks living in the United States. In recent decades, scholars and activists have worked to reclaim and reconstruct this hidden history, but challenges remain due to the scarcity of primary source and the entrenched bias in historical scholarship. The oral traditions of African and indigenous communities, which could provide insight, were often dismissed as unreliable by Western historians. Meanwhile, archaeological evidence like the Olympic heads of African-style artifacts is frequently contested as downplayed in mainstream academia. The push to recognize pre-slave trade African presence requires challenging deeply rooted Eurocentric assumptions, which is met with resistance in societies where history is often wielded as a tool of power. By centering African agency and contributions, we can begin to correct the misrepresentation and restore a fuller, more accurate understanding of black history in the Americas. And that is what the creators that we have in the video are trying to do. They are giving you some of the histories that are less talked about, because when they unearth some of these secrets that are kept, they are able to enlighten the entire population, so that we are able to know how these people have always viewed us, how we have always been targeted, and how there have been forces working to ensure that every good thing that we have is suppressed and does not see the light of day. So this is what is happening, and the history of black people must be told in the best way possible. We must be able and we must remain courageous at all times to talk about the true history of our people, those in African continent and those in United States and other parts of the world. Share your thoughts down in the comment section, and if you're watching us for the first time, please consider subscribing to the channel, like the video and share. Thank you, and let's meet on the next one.